Multiple exposure shooting. This allows you to shoot between 2 and 9 separate frames and then combine them into one composite image. This function also offers several options for how the separate images are combined in camera to achieve the final image. You can access multiple exposure options in the third shooting menu. Within this menu, you can enable the multiple exposure function and set various relevant options, including multiple exposure procedure, multiple exposure control, number of exposures, save source images, and continue multiple exposure. You can also reach the multiple exposure menu by pushing the new Picture Creation button and choosing the multiple exposure option. For multiple exposures, you first select between two shooting procedures: function and control priority or continuous shooting priority. Function control priority is the multi-exposure setting that most users will likely reach for first. It enables you to take each multiple exposure image separately and check the image as you go along. This limits continuous shooting speed but gives you more control over composition and exposure. Continuous shooting priority is intended for a rapid series of continuous shots that will be combined into one multi-exposure, making it well suited for sports and other moving subjects. It maximizes shooting speed, but gives you less precise control over exposure and composition. Here is where the new in-camera multi-exposure feature allows you to really get creative. You have 4 different options for combining the images you've taken into one new multi-exposure file. The additive method simply stacks each image on top of the other, much like multi-exposures in a film camera. If bright areas on 2 separate images overlap, their combined brightness will increase. Photographers can adjust the exposure of each individual image separately. It's often necessary to underexpose images, especially if bright areas will overlap in the final multi-exposure. The average method automatically underexposes each frame so that the finished multi-exposure has the same overall exposure level that a single standard image of the scene would have. It's ideal when 2 or more frames of the same scene will be combined to avoid overexposure as images are composited. The bright method compares the individual images to each other, giving more importance to the bright areas. Bright objects within the multiple exposures will be emphasized as the source images are combined. A classic example would be 2 shots of the nighttime sky with city lights and a separate shot of the full moon. Using the bright method, when the files are combined, the dark areas won't get progressively brighter, and the bright areas will appear at full brightness. The dark method compares the frames to each other, giving more importance to the darker areas. Dark objects within the multiple exposures are emphasized as they're joined into a finished multi-exposure image. This can be effective for removing unwanted bright objects or light reflections. You can choose the number of frames you'd like to use in a finished composite image. Up to 9 original files can be combined in camera into a single finished multi-exposure image. If you are unsure of how many frames you will use, set the number of exposures to its maximum of 9 frames and create a finished multiple exposure out of the images you do shoot. You can either save all images used in the multi-exposure image or save only the resulting multi-exposure image. You can have the multiple exposure function active for only one finished multiple exposure composite image before it automatically returns to normal shooting mode, or you can choose to keep the multi-exposure function active. 4 control method choices for multiple exposures provide unprecedented in-camera control over the final image, greatly expanding what's possible without requiring time at the computer. Having the ability to digitally create multiple exposures breathes new life into an artistic method that film shooters have used for years.
Family entertainment dominates the box office. Millie Pictures is a Chinese-based company, and we are going to take family entertainment global.
Millie Pictures is an exciting, young, dynamic company, and the projects we're going to make are geared towards high-quality family entertainment.
We've not only invested a lot of money in Dragon Nest, but we have the best talent that we could find, and also the best technology with the best equipment to really make this a sensational movie. As our strategic partner, Lenovo not only supplied us with servers, render farms, data centers and workstations, but they gave us software and real technical advice to make Dragon Nest possible.
龙之谷说起来可以说是一个很复杂的电影，也可以说是一个很简单的一个电影。它复杂呢在于它改编自一个很庞大的一个游戏。简单的说来呢，它就是一个小人物如何实现自己梦想。
我是有梦想的。
那我非常赞同约翰拉塞特的观点，艺术对技术是有促进作用的。但同样的呢，新的技术出来对我们艺术创作也是有启发的。就是我们在影片中尝试了不少原创电影不太敢触碰的一些东西，比如说大量的角色，还有人物的一些毛发。在这些细节刻画上，我们花了很多的功夫，还是为了在大荧幕上能够获得和观众近距离直接沟通的那种观影效果，让他更投入这个影片。
在长达18个月的工作周期中，硬件绝对不能成为瓶颈，工作站的性能和稳定性是同等重要的。如果发生宕机，所产生的人力成本将远远超过我们的硬件成本。
放心吧，我会替你保密的。
我们的 S30工作站主要配给我们的动画、解算以及做前期和模型的部门。C30工作站主要应用在我们的特效和渲染部门。D30工作站应用我们群机动画部门。
动画师拿到了这个模型之后，制作出这个模型的一个运动轨迹，包括这个模型身上各个部位的，比如说你的眼神、你的手指、你的身体、你的各个关节运动轨迹的一个变化。整个这套工作呢，都是在我们的工作站里面来完成的。
《龙之谷》这个影片有超过500个特效镜头，几乎涉及到所有的特效类型比如说滚滚浓烟、飞舞的黄沙、环境的火星，在云中穿梭的时候，环境的雾晓。没有这些特效，画面的层次感很难区分开来，也没法达到画面所要体现的艺术感觉。
这样有激情的小伙子已经不多了。
特效制作时间非常的紧迫，这对我们来说是最大的挑战。在很短的时间内要完成这些特效，需要强大的计算机资源作为支撑。屠龙军团和黑龙大军决战是很精亮的，这里面涉及到两军千军万马之间的对战，非常丰富的视觉效果。我们配置了一台 ThinkStation D30、128G 内存和2块 Q6000显卡，才完成了这个镜头的制作。
可能很多人觉得画画的机器配置要求最低的，那其实因为我们画的东西对于精度的要求非常高。参加戛纳电影节的时候，会有那种巨幅的海报，在300 bpi 的情况下，它的像素是3万到2万线的。绘制一幅这样的东西，一个高级原画师他也需要将近1个月的时间。所以说我们联想的工作站起到了非常大的作用。
那当然。
我们的团队对于颜色的要求是非常高的，所以基本上我们这里选用的都是联想 ThinkVision 的 IPS 显示器。
我们的美术组用的显示器分辨率要高，色域一定要非常宽广，它能够显示出很多细微的颜色的差别。比如说龙的这个火焰的颜色吧，观众认为就是一个紫色的，但是我们在设计中考虑的非常的细致，它是有一个渐变的，它的嘴边和末端的颜色饱和度、色相，包括透明度，全都是不一样的。所以我们要确保每一个 artist 所用的屏幕上的紫颜色都是同一个。以前还真碰到过这个问题，虽然同一品牌的，但是色温啊，包括亮度啊，这些都不一样。为了去校每一台颜色，蜘蛛都换了好几个，而且效率非常的低下。
这下亏大了。
这次我们采用了联想的 Think Vision 30寸的显示器，色域非常的宽广，在灰度上面是完完全全可以跟高端的 CRT 显示器媲美的，这对我们来说非常非常的重要。
我们的机房主要使用联想的 RD630服务器来作为我们的预控和整个系统管理，同时我们采用的是联想的 C30来作为我们渲染农场的基础架构搭建。这个渲染农场是国内最大的企业级的 GPU 渲染农场，它配备了300块的英伟达特斯拉显卡作为我们的计算核心。GPU 渲染从本质上来讲，它是新一代的渲染技术，它的渲染的速度是同质量情况下的 CPU 的渲染速度的6到8倍。我们所使用的 GPU 渲染技术能够极大的缩短我们的渲染时间。
这还差不多。
Together, Millie Pictures and Lenovo really make a great team. They provided us with technical support and capability to really make this the best animated film that China's ever made.
Hi, my name is Julianne Koss, and I'm going to show you in the next few minutes my top 6 features in Photoshop CS6. We'll start here with Camera Raw. You'll notice that the basic panel has been completely redone. It is now so easy to set my black point, set my white point, adjust my highlights as well as my shadows so that we can really see detail in there. We can zoom in, scoot over, and I can remove any chromatic aberration that I might get from a wide angle lens. And we can go to my tone curve. I have more control than ever now. I actually have it per channel, so I can come in here and do some color correction, like maybe warming this up a little bit. It also enables me to do much more creative color adjustments. So for example, we can take out all of the color out of the saturation area, return back to my point curve, and maybe do a little cross-process effect where I've got some blues in the shadow, but some yellow in my highlights. I can even combine that with other channels like red or green in order to make that a little bit more purple down there and still keep that yellow up at the top. So tons of great things that you can do now in Adobe Camera Raw. Let's go ahead and move over to Photoshop. How many of you have ever had to deal with a lot of text in a Photoshop document? Wouldn't it be really nice to be able to just select your type tool and then use new paragraph styles and character styles in order to format all of that type? So here now it's as easy as just clicking on the styles that I created. I've I've got different categories here for notes. We can scoot down. You can see here if I want to change this to a category. And in fact, if I double click on this, we can look at this. I've got all your basic and advanced character formats that you can include in your paragraph style. We have the open type features, indents and spacing. That includes all of your justification as well as alignment. We've got the every line composer. We've also got justification and hyphenation options in here. So it's now so easy to simply move through the document. And if we've got a title there and move down and there's a description, keep on moving back and forth between a title and a description. You can see that doing this across multiple documents, maybe if you're laying out a web page or something, this just becomes really, really simple and fast, and it makes your work consistent, obviously, across documents. Now, those are all paragraph. I can also change character styles. So just by selecting this type right here, we move over character styles. We can apply those. Obviously, we can come up here and apply this as many times as we want to. And of course, we can override that as well. If we don't like that red, we can change that to blue. You can see that I can hide that. And you'll also notice that it tells me that there has been a change that I can either update and actually make a new paragraph style from, or I can go ahead and just cancel that. So lots of flexibility here. You can import and export your styles. In addition, we've made a ton of changes to our vector shape layers. I can drag out a custom shape. I can go ahead and fill that shape with either a solid color, with a gradient, or with a pattern. I can choose a color from my image area here, and you'll notice that it keeps track of my recently used colors. If I move over here and add a stroke, I might want to add a solid color stroke. Let's make it really bright so that we can see it. We can change the width of that stroke, and we can also come in here and make custom dashed or dotted lines in that stroke. You'll see there's more options here so that I can go ahead and change the dash and the gap, as well as the alignment, the caps, and the corners. Of course, if we don't like that, we can just set that stroke to none. You can easily transform your shape layers. If I wanted to make a cutout, that's as easy as selecting another shape tool and then changing what it is that I want to create. So for example, we could subtract from a shape and I could punch a hole right in there. Or if I wanted to make additional shapes, I would just select new layer. We can go back to our custom shape. We'll drag out one here. Command J will copy it. We can move that over. And you can see now that I have 3 shape layers. If I want to merge any of these together, we can use Command E, and it will actually merge all of those shapes without rasterizing them. If I want to grab my path selection tool and just select one of these shapes, I can now quickly jump that shape to its own layer so that I can put different attributes on that shape. So tons of improvements there. All right, let's move to the next image. Let's talk about blurring an image. Obviously, we've got a lot of distracting elements on the left and right hand side of this image. So let's go in and we will add a tilt shift blur here. You can see that we can rotate this in order to get it to be vertical. Scoot it over right on top of that flower. We can change the width of these to determine exactly what areas I want to have blurred, and then I can change how much blur I want. So I'll just pull this in a little bit, and then to make this a little bit more realistic, let's go ahead and add a little bit of a light bokeh effect. You can see the sparkles that are starting over here. Now I probably want to blur that a little bit more, so now we can back off on that. We can really customize this to get it the exact way that we want it. Tap return or enter in order to apply that, and we can see a quick before and after. See how we just removed all of those distracting elements to really focus in on the one flower. And there's much more than just that. There's these 2 other types of blurs as well. We've got field blur and iris blur. Let's go ahead and start with field blur. I want to make sure that the rabbit stays sharp, so I'm going to eliminate the blur there, but then I'm going to set down multiple pins all the way around the rabbit, and here I can adjust each one of these individually in order to get just the amount of blur I want, exactly where I want it. In fact, for those of you who want more information, you can tap the M key. That will actually show you the mask, and then you can pull these further apart or closer together in order to get that mask to only affect the areas that you want it to, so that, for example, the little nose here of the bunny isn't blurred. Again, we tap the return key in order to apply that. And you can see there before and after. So it is so easy to get a selective blur on the image and really draw the viewer's eye into exactly the area that you want them to be looking at. Okay, the fifth feature is really a quick one, but I think it's very cool. I'll tap the C key for the crop tool. You'll notice now that I can go ahead and crop my image and move my image within the crop area. I can quickly crop actually outside the area if I want to add some transparency. And if I've forgotten to set the aspect ratio before I come in here, you'll notice that I don't have to back out of the crop tool anymore. I can simply set that aspect ratio while I'm in here and then readjust. I've got the nice rule of thirds and other views that I can choose from. And of course, I probably don't want to delete these crop pixels just in case I might want to come back to them later. One other thing that's kind of associated with that, Command or Control T to go into free transform. You'll notice now that I don't have to change the algorithm that I'm using. When I sample up versus sample down, I can select it right here, or I can just have Photoshop do it for me by choosing automatic. That way it will use the correct algorithm whether I'm resampling up or down. And in fact, that's even a preference here in general to go ahead and set that for your image interpolation. And finally, let's just take a quick look at video. You'll notice here that I've got 3 layers. Let's show my timeline. These 3 layers are going to be stacked by default, one on top of each other. That's not what I want. I want them to play in a sequence. So I'll just select those 3 layers. We'll use the new video group from clips option. And now let's zoom out so that we can see that indeed these 3 video clips are sequenced now. Of course, I can change the sequence by simply dragging and dropping the clips. I can change the endpoints and I get a nice preview there. Once I change the endpoint or the out point of a clip, you can see that Photoshop automatically will just scoot those over so there's no gaps in between them. I can also click and change the duration or the speed of the clip. I can change my volume and other options for my audio. I can even mute this audio that I recorded with this clip so that I could add a nice audio overlay to the whole series of clips that I'm using. And of course, I can use any of the features in Photoshop to make creative effects or to do color correction, for example. So if I've got this last clip targeted in my layers panel, you will notice that if I add maybe a color balance correction layer, and I just move this a little towards cyan and blue, you can see that it's automatically clipped that for me. I don't have to worry about it. That is the only clip that this adjustment layer is going to change. Of course, if I didn't want that, we could move above the clip. I could add another adjustment layer. Again, to make something really obvious, let's just add a black and white adjustment layer, and let's go ahead and shorten it. Maybe I only want it over this section of the clips, but it's over 2 different clips. Well, it's very abrupt the way I have it right now. I'd really like some help making some fades and some transitions. That's what this icon is right here. So we can fade that in and we can fade it out. In addition, I can make a crossfade between 2 clips. So again, so it's no longer a straight cut anymore. Now there's a nice transition from clip to clip. I can also fade in from black at the beginning and fade out to black at the end. So let's see what that looks like. We're going to fade in. We'll see the first video. It'll crossfade to the next one. We go into the black and white adjustment layer, fade into the last video clip, and then fade out. I've got one more item here. This is a layer that you can see is hidden. Let's go ahead and make that visible. This happens to be a smart object, so let's put our time insertion cursor right above that. And what I want to do is I want to change the transformation properties of that. How cool is that? That I can go to the beginning of the clip, set a keyframe so that it appears maybe in this location and maybe at this size, and then move forward in time, change the size of that just slightly so that it's moving, and Photoshop automatically adds the second keyframe. So now I've got a nice pan here. Of course, if I want to do this on a bunch of images, you'll notice that on my stills, I also have the ability to just use these presets. Really, really easy way to make maybe a Ken Burns effect on your images. Well, unfortunately, I can only have 6 top features right now, so those are the top 6 features for Photoshop CS6. My name is Julianne Kost. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll check it out.
Many people think that PDF is a static format and that content is locked inside. But with Acrobat 11, you can save time from retyping that information by exporting it directly into Microsoft Word and Excel. And with Acrobat Pro, you can export it into Microsoft PowerPoint as well. So here's a file I have in Acrobat, and if I click on Tools, Content Editing, and Export File to Microsoft PowerPoint, let's go ahead and save. Let's go over to my folder, and as it comes up, I can open it in PowerPoint, and I can see that all the content and editing came over, including things like bullets and the master layout. In another PDF document, I can select, for instance, a table, and I can export this to Word, but I'm going to choose to export it to Excel. I'll do a right-click, Export Selection As. Let's do an Excel workbook. Save. Again, go over to my folder and open up the Excel file. And again, the content and the format all came over great. Acrobat 11 saves you the hassle of retyping that information so you can get your job done faster.
My name is Mark Payne. I was named as the Olympics Photographer of the Year last year at the London 2012 Games. Twice been Sports Photographer of the Year as well. And I get sent all over the world to interview athletes and sporting stars. My most well-known image is of me being hit by Tiger Woods' ball in the Ryder Cup. We're in London at the O'Neill Shoreditch Showdown, which is a snowboarding event bang in the middle of London, urban landscape with a temporary snow structure here, and we've got some of the world's best snowboarders coming along here. Based in Britain, I don't shoot lots of winter sport, but what it's really good for is taking your mind back to the basics and photographically remembering all the techniques you have to put in place. I'm going to show how any photographer can get professional looking shots by choosing the right lens and by putting into action some top tips to shoot great sport. The most important thing is to take a step back and have a look at exactly what the athletes are doing. See the shapes they're making, see their takeoff points, their landing points, and decide exactly what is the moment you want to capture with your camera. We need to find a spot which really gives our pictures the most impact. The composition is crucial because it can make a good picture even better just by getting that composition right. We're using high shutter speeds because, you know, these guys are going to be going fast down the slope. Fast shutter speeds tend to lead to high ISOs. There's absolutely no problem turning up the ISO. Today we want flexibility because we've got snowboarders going from top of the slope to the bottom of the slope. So we want a telephoto zoom. It's really important to get the viewer right amongst the action. A great lens to use is 70-300, great variety. You can go extreme, you can go 18-300 if you like, which obviously gives you a wide angle, because then we can track the athletes all the way from the top to the bottom, hopefully on continuous motor drive and getting lots of in-focus pictures. It's important to think about landscapes with sports photography because most people assume fast telephoto lenses freeze the action close up, but you need to put the viewer in the environment as well to show him or her where you are. Choose something lovely like a 10-24 or 12-24. Here we're using a fisheye lens. It's a lovely picture here with the bus. Very much a London picture, setting the scene. The main problem obviously is lack of light, so we need to choose a faster lens, a prime lens. Change to a 35 or a 50. It's quite dark now, so we can shoot them wide open, get some real quality here, shoot them at 1.8. To get a great sports portrait, what you've got to do, always about the eyes, and the great lens to do it is a 35mm or a 50mm lens. If you can shoot it wide open from 1.8 apertures, you can completely throw away your background in your portrait, concentrating solely on your subject.
Hey everybody, Jem Schofield here and welcome to the Canon EOS C100 video tutorial series. In this video, it's all about shooting with the Canon C100, so let's get started. Okay, so I'm in the hot seat now and we're in a pretty typical interview style setup, 3-point lighting, and we've got Peter now behind the main production camera. And we're going to talk about one of the first things that we like to do when we're on a set before the client even shows up, which is make sure that our white balance is correct. And there's a couple of places to get to that on the C100. I'm actually going to have you pan the camera so everybody can see this. There's a button on the side of the camera, WB for white balance. You press that, and then if you look at the display, you'll see that that is highlighted, and you can cycle through those. Another way that you can get to this, which is really my preferred method on the camera, is with the grip unit attached. You press the joystick in. You can then cycle going up and down through the different white balance settings. We can see our auto white balance, we can see our custom white balance, we can see manual white balance, and then there are also a couple of presets in there for incandescent lighting, which would be tungsten, basically 3200 Kelvin, and then also for outdoor shooting, daylight around 5400 Kelvin. So let's actually go back to auto white balance and talk about that for just a second. And auto white balance can be a convenient way to just quickly get a good looking picture on your camera. But the problem with it is as things are coming in and out of frame, the camera will constantly try to white balance to those objects. So for me, I think that a couple of better ways to do this, to use the other features in there. Let's go ahead and cycle through and go, because we're using tungsten light now, and we'll use the incandescent option there, which is at about 3200 Kelvin. Though our lighting is a slightly warmer than 3200, so it may come out a little bit cool depending on what you're shooting with. Now when we're outside, we could use the daylight preset and see how that looks as a starting point, or we could cycle through, and let's go ahead and do a manual white balance. You'll see a K for Kelvin temperature, and on this camera, we can adjust our Kelvin anywhere from 2000 to 15,000 Kelvin. So in this situation, we're at about 3500 Kelvin. Let's go ahead and warm that up a little bit. As we increase the Kelvin temperature, it warms the image up and go to about a 38 or a 3900 Kelvin, and we can see how that looks on the camera. Let's go ahead and go to one of the custom white balance settings. There's an A and a B. And in order to do a custom white balance, you really need to have a white card, generally not a white piece of paper, but something like a true white card, and I have a couple of them here. And what you do is you take the camera and you will either, if you have a long lens, you can actually fill the frame with the white that is in front of the camera in the lighting that the subject is in, or you may have to pick up the camera and actually bring it closer to the subject to fill the frame. And then if you just pan the camera, Peter, for a second, we can take a look at that button on the side of the camera that you press. You press that button and it will actually do a custom white balance. So I think that's a pretty good overview of the white balance settings on the C100. The next thing we're going to do is take a look at how to quickly get to ISO or gain and also to aperture on the camera system. Okay, so one of my favorite ways to get to stuff on the C100 is by using the grip unit on the camera. And I'm actually going to have Peter go over and press the joystick, and if you just hit the right arrow and cycle through the options that we have there, you can see that we can cycle from white balance, we can go from white balance to our ISO or gain settings depending on how we have it set up in our menu system, and then we can also go and change our shutter very quickly. Let's go over to ISO right now because this is something you're going to be doing with the camera on a very, very regular basis, and let's increase the ISO to 5,000 just so that we can see a change there. Obviously it's going to be overexposed, and in order to get back to where we need to be, we'll have to change our aperture. Starting aperture was at 5.6 for the beginning of this video, and then we also had an ISO of 1250. So if we increase it to 5,000, that's 2 stops. We're obviously going to have to change our aperture, and we can do that by using the dial that's on the grip unit. Let's go ahead and open that back up to a 5.6, and we can drop our ISO down to 1250 again, and then we should be fine. Let's say, for instance, we were shooting an interview with somebody who moved around a lot. They were, very animated when they were doing things. Well, a 5.6 is a good starting point when you're shooting with a large sensor camera, standard interview setup, but we wanted to just make sure we had a little bit of a deeper depth of field. Let's go ahead and change our ISO to 2500, and that's a full stop difference. So now we're going to stop down the camera by a stop on aperture, so we go to an f8. And then now we get a little bit more leeway in terms of that subject being able to move around in the frame. Now I want to talk to you about some very special features on the C100, one-shot AF and push auto iris. Let's actually take a look at one-shot AF first. I'm going to have you pan the camera, and in order to use this feature on the camera system, you have to make sure that the AF is turned on your lens. So we're going to turn that on, and I should be out of focus right now, but there is a button at the front of the camera, the front left side of the camera, and you just hold that button in. You don't let go, and then all of a sudden that white box is going to turn green, and that means that you have critical focus. Let's go ahead and throw the lens out of focus again. We'll just take a look at that one more time. In fact, can you pan the camera over so we can see where that button is on the front there? You'll see that that's the one-shot AF button. And let's go ahead and pan back. We will hold down that button. You'll see the white box on the display, and then it'll settle in. And then as soon as it's green, you have critical focus. That's one-shot AF. So now let's take a look at the push auto iris feature. Actually, let's have you stop down the camera to, I don't know, an F11 or something like that, and pan the camera so everybody can see where this button is. It's on the side of the camera body, and we are now going to press that once we're on the subject and see that it will go ahead and adjust the iris for the exposure there. And of course, you know, this is used in conjunction with the light metering modes on the camera system, and you're going to adjust this to your taste. Sometimes you'll find that when you're using something like push auto iris that it's right where you want it to be, or you could use it as a starting point and then just reach over there and make a minor adjustment by 1/3 of a stop if you needed to, in order to get the exposure to where you wanted it to be for your shot. So now we're going to talk about the ND filters on the Canon EOS C100. Great feature, especially considering the size of this camera body. I mean, this little camera body here is so small, and we actually have 3 stages of ND when we're using the camera. But we basically have ND1, which is 2 stops of ND. We can go to the second stage, that is 4 stops of ND. And then we can go to the next stage, and that is 6 stops of ND. And then if we go and rotate it one more time, we go back to no ND at all. Now the purpose of ND, of course, is to cut the amount of light that is coming into the camera so that you can control your aperture. Most of the time we're using ND in exterior locations, so let's take a look at how we might use that outside, where there's so much light coming into the camera that even if you're shooting at an ISO of 850 on the camera system, you need to stop down, and you've got such a deep depth of field, and what you want to be able to do is you want to get a shallower depth of field. So before we get into reviewing clips with the C100, I want to talk a little bit more about shooting with the camera. Because of its size, because of its form factor, it's ideal for shooting just handheld. You put the grip unit on there, use IS lenses, and it's really, really comfortable to shoot that way. But it's also ideal because it's so lightweight and so compact to use with sliders, handheld rigs, shoulder-mounted rigs, jibs, and of course monopods and tripod systems. So in terms of reviewing your clips when you're using the C100, there's a couple of ways we can do that. If you want to keep the camera in the camera mode and you want to review the last clip that you shot, that's very easy to do. I'm going to actually have you pan the camera so everybody can see this, and there's a button on the back of the camera. You can press that and it will actually play back that clip. Now it's doing it without sound. It's letting you review picture, but you can actually see that last take in its entirety if you want, and that will give you an idea of what that take looked like. And if you're pushing that to a larger external monitor, you can make sure that your focus is tack sharp and that you don't have anything in terms of soft focus. But let's go ahead and now take a look at properly reviewing your clips, and you can dig into this a little bit more in the manual as well. Okay, so now we're going to take the C100 out of camera and we're going to select media. So I'm going to have you go to the side of the camera there and turn the dial, and there you are on media. It's going to reboot into the media mode of the camera system. So when you're out in the field and you want to go ahead and take a look at all of the clips that you've shot or see a particular clip, not just the last one, you can use a joystick on the grip unit to navigate to the clips that you want to review, and then you can use the transport controls on the back of the camera. Now there's other functionality in the media mode of the camera system, and you can refer to the user's manual for that. So there you have it. That's an overview of shooting with the Canon EOS C100 camera system, both in this type of environment and out in the field. So easy to use, incredibly versatile camera system. Go out and shoot something and enjoy.